a large number of people are treating wine the way they treat clothes. They are looking at the label they like, the one they know, the one they're familiar with, and that's what they buy. But the wine people imagine that everybody, the whole world, should be turned on to wine. Everybody's got to learn about wine. No, they don't.
The wine industry don't think they need marketing, but the more people recommend it, what people see or know about in the specific product, that's what they want to buy. I think we just need to create opportunities.
If we're making too much wine and we haven't created a demand for our particular wine, we are not going to make any money. And if we don't make any money, we are going to go become extinct. Industries evolve. And what happens is, and it isn't the strongest that survive, it's the most adaptable that survive.
Business is about networking, like what we actually do to different, how we can actually bring in innovation, how we can make things be better than was before.
The first thing I'm going to say is actually work out what have you got, what is your product, how does it fit into the market.
I can't believe I'm talking to you today, Robert. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to this podcast.
I am really happy to be doing this, and I've been following what you've been doing, and the wine scene has got huge numbers of people in it, but quite often it can feel quite lonely if you're not singing from the same hymn book as everybody else. And it does seem to me that in the wine industry, there's not just one hymn book, there are a few hymn books, but if you're not actually singing from one of those, people can look at you and say, what are you doing here? You're not part of the congregation.
Yeah, and I'm a very big fan of you because your articles and everything you're writing, everything you do, it's pretty much like more what I believe, and then it's so amazing to be able to talk to you, because yes, and then because I think a little bit different. I feel like lots of time lonely, and it's amazing to be able to have a people like you where to say like, nah, we need to rethink, we need to change the things, the future is need to be different. And then it's so great to be able to build in that group together where we can actually be able to talk about the future of wine, because the wine is not going to be the same as it have the past. But probably everyone knows who is Robert Joseph in the wine industry. But do you want to just doing a little introduction about like how amazing things you bring to the wine industry?
I guess, I don't think I know anything more. I know a lot less than a lot of my friends and colleagues about lots of stuff, but I guess my experience is broader than many. I grew up, my parents accidentally ended up owning a hotel and restaurant, so I learned a bit about wine service. I took over wine. I fell in love with wine. My life took that wrong turning, I could say, in some ways. When I was like 15 years old, I went off to Champagne and did 2 weeks to improve my French at Charles Heidsieck Champagne. I fell in love briefly with the daughter of the guy who was running the conveyor belt where I was putting the bottles on the conveyor belt there. Came back, ended up choosing wine for the restaurant. Went off to Burgundy with my then the woman I was in love with. Stayed there for nearly 6 years. Came back to the UK. Started a wine magazine. Got a wine column in a newspaper. Wrote some books. So I was effectively a wine critic. I guess the thing that we did that was different then was we were quite early in talking about what we then called the New World. So we were among, it's called Wine International Magazine. And while Decanter was focusing on Bordeaux and the classics, we were very keen on Australia, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, California. And then we started something called the International Wine Challenge, which became the world's biggest wine competition. With, in those days, about 10,000 wines, which I then took to a wide range of countries, including China, Japan, India, Vietnam, Singapore, Hong Kong, Poland, Russia. And I've actually been involved in wine competitions in Chile, in Argentina, and Portugal, and so on. And then in 2005, my life changed. My son was born. The wine competition and the magazine were sold, and it was a time to take another look at life. And I thought I wasn't going to be, well, two things actually. One was that I woke up and I realized that I had a condition that I don't tell everybody about, but I found out I was talking to myself. I was talking about, and it was worrying. And when I say I was talking to myself, what I mean is I was going to dinner parties and I was sitting next to people who were better educated and in many ways and wealthier and so on than me, and they didn't know that Chablis was made from Chardonnay. And I had written that, 1,000 times, 2,000 times, and now at that time I'd been to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people I've met in a row who didn't know, and I thought, who have I been talking to? Who have I been writing these books and these articles and everything else to? Because all of these very intelligent and well-educated people haven't been reading what I've been writing, and they've not been reading what any of my colleagues and friends in wine have been writing. And what's the point? Who am I writing for? Myself? Am I writing for a tiny little clique of wine geeks and fans? And if I'm writing for them, why do I keep telling them about Chardonnay and Chablis? Because they probably already know. And so, and the other thing was that financially, I thought I'd have to feed and clothe and house and educate my son, and then later on my daughter. And I realized that wine writing, we were already beginning to see blogs. This is 2005. Some really good free material on wine appearing, more and more of it. And I thought this isn't really going to be sustainable as a job anyway. So that was when I stopped being a wine critic, and I started to become a wine producer and a consultant and a public speaker. So that's been the last, if you like, nearly 20 years, 19 years. Starting off making wine in France, and we were making what, again, we could call New World wine in the Languedoc in Minervois. So we started making a Cabernet Syrah and a Chardonnay Viognier. And then those have grown now to 15 different wines there. We do 3.8 million bottles. It's called Le Grand Noir. It has a black sheep on the label. And the reason it's a black sheep is because we were the odd one. All the white sheep were going that way, and we were the black sheep. We were going the other way. And our French neighbors said, "You're going to go bust. You'll go bankrupt." And we didn't. We're now on sale in 60 odd countries, and I think we're just arriving in Brazil if we're not already there. And we're in Australia. And since then, other wines, other consultancies, and just launched a wine in Georgia.
Yeah, that's actually something I want to talk about, because it was 2024. Yeah, it just was this year.
No, it's just really, we did a real test, effective test bottling last year of 2,500 red, 2,500 white. I think this year we will have done 25,000. But importantly, it's not even a vintage, it's an assemblage.
Yeah.
So although it's got a year on the label, it says assemblage 20. The first wine that will go out, the one you'll see if you like, is assemblage 23. So, which is exactly the same concept as champagne houses are increasingly doing. Roederer is doing it, if you like, with their what used to be their non-vintage, where it's a blend of different vintages with a date and a time, and we tell people what the blend is, but I'm not constrained by years or grape varieties.
Wow. And tell me about which, I don't know if you can tell us already, but what's the marketing, or what are innovative ideas you wanted to bring to the market by produce such assemblage in a different, like a different way, the original thinking way to do wine, to make wine?
Well, I want to go back one, and I think the big problem is I look at wine in all sorts of ways, but one of them is that I think it's only 20% of Americans drink wine with any regularity. 30%, will drink it. There'll be an additional 10 15% who drink it very occasionally, but basically only 20% drink it regularly. And in France, really regularly, again, we're talking about 30%, and that used to be much more, obviously. So the first thing I'll say is wine is a minority activity. But the trouble is the people who have been seduced, who have fallen in love with, for whatever reason, that, or even just drink it just as a casual drink, they presume that everybody else does the same.
Yes.
So the first thing I say is, and it could be like classical music. If you love classical music, if you love opera, if you love jazz, as I do, you tend to imagine that everybody else is either a classical music fan, or all we need to do is introduce them, take them to a few concerts, play them a few concertos or symphonies, and they're going to become classical music fans, and they're going to start going to concerts. And it's almost as if it's like either I go around with a syringe and I jab you with the thing, or maybe it's a mosquito that comes along and bites you. And the thing we don't understand is that most of my wine loving, wine enthusiastic friends have no interest in jazz, for example, and quite a lot of them listen to classical music occasionally. They're certainly not listening to classical music every day or a little every week. And most of them, and I'm talking to you there in Brazil, I go to wine events with professionals, and we're all talking passionately about appellations and grapes and so on. And then we queue up for the coffee, and the coffee comes from an espresso machine. And I say to people, hey, where's this coffee come from? I don't know. Is it Ethiopian, Costa Rican, Brazilian, Peruvian? And by the way, what tea did you drink this morning? Was that English breakfast tea? Which part of England do you think we grow tea leaves in? By the way, we don't anywhere.
I don't even know what's this.
And the chocolate you enjoyed, do you know where that came from? But I don't have a problem with people not knowing where the coffee came from. And I'm sure that there are people who are really into coffee who know nothing about wine. And I think that's fine. But the wine people imagine that everybody, the whole world, should be turned on to wine. So come back to your question, which I do remember your question. To me, in marketing wine, like marketing clothes, you don't say, oh, I've got a clothes store and I've got some Armani suits here, and I got some really great grungy T-shirts here, and I got some shorts. You know which people are going to go into which part of the store and buy which things. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the person who buys the Armani suit isn't also going to buy the grungy T-shirt, but they're probably going to make that purchase on a different occasion with a different mindset. For different reasons to wear on a different occasion. So to me, my Le Grand Noir wines, we are unashamedly selling these to people who would otherwise be buying a Californian Chardonnay or potentially an Australian Syrah or whatever. Our wines are French. They're not as big and rich as the caricature New World wines are, but we know that New World wines don't fit a model anymore, if ever they did. But that's what I want. I want somebody who wants a reasonably simple answer to the question, I want a wine. So it's red. Do I want Pinot Noir? Yes, no. Do I want Cabernet? Yes, no. Syrah. So they make that simple for them. We do our best to blend. In France, we are growing grapes across a wide range of altitudes and soils, and we behave like champagne producers. We want every vintage to taste as close to the previous vintage, ideally a bit better, as possible. I don't want people saying, ooh, the 2022 was a little bit more acidic or a little richer or whatever. Actually, as far as I'm concerned, like champagne, I want them to have the same experience. And we have a website with some nice videos and pictures and all the rest, but I'm not expecting most people to go looking for it. I think they're buying it. And I have this expression, and this, I can imagine the thunderbolt's going to come down and hit me. But I have an expression, grababa, grape-based beverage alcohol, and people are buying it like beer. Now, you're in Adelaide at the moment. I love Cooper's. if you like, as a beer. But most people don't really care very much about what it is. It's just a nice beer, and other people are drinking Fosters, and they're having fun as well. So that's that. Whereas Kavshiri, my Georgian wine, is deliberately the opposite of the French project. So the one thing in common is I think they've both hopefully got labels that people, once they've seen them, may recognize, because I think that's important. The French wine is called Le Grand Noir, which some people may or may not struggle to pronounce, but it's reasonably pronounceable, and it's got a black sheep on it. The Georgian wine is called Cav Shiri, and that may seem difficult, but if you've seen much of anything from Georgia, you'll find that is about one of the most pronounceable things you'll ever see in Georgia.
For sure.
And
the only grape variety that can pronounce completely well is Saparavi. The rest.
And the Grand Noir has got a black sheep on it because it was different, and the Kavshiri is also different, but it's got a label which has got paths coming together because the word Kavshiri means coming together. But it's absolutely an on-trade specialist, hand-sold product. It is not going to fall off the wine off a shelf unless I'm very lucky with some sale material that I haven't yet come up with or whatever. It is not, and you can never control point of sale anyway. It is not going to sell itself. Whereas my French wine, the label I think is sufficiently different. It's one of that set of Chardonnays or Cabernets or whatever. It may, at its price point and so on, fall into somebody's hands, and then I'm relying on them liking it enough to want to buy it again. That's obviously true for anything you sell. But here, the Kavshiri concept is going to depend on somebody telling somebody else to try this unusual thing from Georgia. And so it is emphatically a discovery product. And I think what interests me is the difference between he's wearing a Rolex, she's wearing a Swatch, and I'm wearing this obscure watch from this Swiss company that no one's ever heard of. And aren't I clever to have found it? And I think I'm doing both. I'm doing the Swatch, and I'm doing the obscure Swiss watch.
And I think you can test pretty much what is the best approach, how work the best.
Yeah.
But my question is, by doing this, like you don't have a vintage, blend it between, just make consistent as a champagne. You probably have like many people in the wine industry telling you just still wanted to do the same thing every year. What's about the romanticism, like the whole romantic of the vintage and how.
Ironically, Priscilla, no, it's actually no, Priscilla. Actually, it's not quite like that because it's even more. My French wine, which we do our best to make the same every year, has a vintage on it. Because the distributors and everybody still thinks you need to have a vintage on the wine. My Georgian wine, which is the blend of vintages, which has the word assemblage on it, will taste different every time. So essentially, each assemblage sometimes there'll be much more of one grape, much less of another grape, and so people will compare. I hope they will compare assemblage 24 to assemblage 23. So essentially, I'm not in Georgia. I absolutely do not want every wine to taste the same. I want it to taste recognizably. I want it to have the characters of that wine. Otherwise, what's the point? But I want it to be as varied as vintages can vary. But so you think about Vega Sicilia in Spain. They've had this Unico wine. It's famous as a non-vintage or as a multi. I prefer multi-vintage rather than non-vintage, and people do compare them. So the two things are different, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is we've got two approaches. We have got the Nespresso approach, where people find the style the pod color that they like, or the make of breakfast tea they like, and they go back to it. And if we look at brands, it could be Miolo in Brazil, it could be Penfolds in Australia, or any brand you like at any price level. And those people are not necessarily bothered about where bin 28 came from. They're not bothered about the soil or anything else. They like and find. But then, of
Yeah.
course, we've got the people who are passionate, and
Yes.
in Australian terms, it could be Hill of Grace, it could be Grange, or it could be
Mm-hmm.
some obscure little producer somewhere in Margaret River, or in Brazil, the same thing. It could be in Bento Gonçalves or wherever. Essentially, we've got the discoverers, and the travelers. And when we go on holiday, some people actually
Mm-hmm.
want to have got the whole trip planned, or they go straight to the resort, and they indeed go back to the same resort they went last time, and they've got a favorite restaurant, they go back to it. And other people, every year is a
Only
different
different.
thing.
Yeah.
And I am absolutely not saying that one of those is better than the other, and I am saying that some people may do both of those. But as in the wine business, we don't think about that. And we bang on
Yeah.
about education. Everybody's got to learn about wine. No, they don't.
I tell that about my own experience because I work in cellar doors in Australia, so that's how I started. And I remember even me, I was one of them. I like you have this group of like younger ladies and just talking about anything else, and really interested to talk about wine. It's the most you want to look at each other and say like, I'm not going to host it. I'm not going to host it. Like who's going to host it? Because we just wanted to talking like really pure about the wine. Just like you be really as a wine educator to tell about soils, climates, flavors, whatever else we've been told that's how you present wine, right? So when you see like these kind of groups and then you don't want to engage them with you because they don't want to listen what you wanted to say, you almost don't really give the attention. And then that's something I learning later on, because it's something like these people buy wines as well, and these people probably the future. When I moved it from the cellar doors to retailers, and I talk with people in the retailers, and when people just coming to buy wine, and it's like, oh, this is from this wine wine critic and whatever, and say, who are then? Never heard about. Who's James Holiday? And it's like, is a famous person. I should know who it is. And it's like when it's like, oh, it was 98 points in decanter. It's like, decanter, what's that? And I was like, realize my small word, what I think it was the truth, like everything that I was thinking. I think it's the same happened to you when you talk with people higher end. That's happened to me as well. I was like, oh my God. And I have like a guy he studied at Westside, and he's coming to me to ask him like what I recommend for him to taste it to be able to do the exams and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, right. And then he came another day and say, Chris, I wanted to learn more about wine. I wanted to do an online course, but I don't know this lady is called Jancis Robson. I was like, oh my God, she's a trust person. It's like, yes, she is. Definitely is. And then, when I realized it's like, everyone I know, everyone I thought everyone probably know as well, they are not really attached and engaging with this, this new generations, like 30 years old. Like most of my friends, it doesn't even know the magazines, one magazine, they didn't even know they exist. It's just like, oh my God, this is completely upside down. It was like when I realized it's like, I need to do something different. It's no point for
Well,
me.
I love the fact that you are doing it. I guess I'm feeling each generation is different, that's certain, but I think we've over focus on Gen Z versus millennials, just whatever. I think there's certain commonalities through all of it. And I think when it comes to wine, what I say is that actually people are quite interested in wine, but, and there's a very big but, if I go to a dinner or somebody says, what do you do? I've tried this out. You say, I work for the tax office, and they don't really want to engage with you very much. You say,
Not
I'm a
much work.
right. I'm a dentist. It doesn't really work very well. You say I'm in wine, and they, oh, really? That's interesting. And for the next hour or two, they will actually quite possibly ask you lots of questions and so on, because they actually are quite interested. the point about this is that those people the next morning will not go out and buy your book or read your magazine or whatever. What they wanted was 1 hour or 2 hours of instant, cheap, easy wine stuff. And
Yeah.
that's the average person. And I've tried, and I said, basically, if I tell them I'm a stunt man, and this hasn't worked very well as a plan, which if you can see me, you can understand why. But if I told them I was a stunt man, they would be fascinated for a couple of hours to hear about how you make stunts. And I would absolutely love to hear somebody do that. But am I going to go and read Stunt magazine? Am I going to do anything more? No, I've just my dose of it. And so what I usually say is that most people want to know about wine in the way that I want to get fit. I want to wake up tomorrow morning without exercising and without dieting, and I want to look better and feel better and so on. And I think most people, they don't want to do
Love
a
that
wine
analogy.
they don't want to do a wine course, they don't want to read a book or anything else. They just would like somehow not to feel so daunted and confused when they go to a restaurant and they look at all these pages of stuff and where do I go and
Oh,
what do I do. So they would love somehow in their brain something to go, oh look, number 17, that'll be the one to do. But they don't want to have
yeah.
to work to get there.
Yeah, and that's exactly. I love that analogy because I think that's what's happening in our society, in everything. We don't really want to think it too much about. And then imagine like you're going with your partner or your wife or with your girlfriend, and you need to wait in like pages and in pages of the wine to choose one. It's so difficult. And
But
then
but
you just you don't have a conversation with her or with your friends because you're just looking for this many pages of wine.
But it's
Yeah,
not a
I agree.
generational thing. It's not Gen Z, millennials. It's actually, take the average
True.
50-year-old
Very
and
true.
take
Yeah.
them into a shoe shop. How do we buy shoes? We find the ones we like, we try them on, and we find the ones we like, and we buy them, and then sometimes we regret it, and sometimes we don't. Nobody says you have to go to the Shoe Education Trust and learn about leather and learn about how they make shoes and how they make the soles and no, we just go. And so why can't we treat wine the way we treat clothes?
Yeah.
Because and we do, and I think the point to be made is if we go and stand in any wine store anywhere, a large number of people are treating wine the way they treat clothes. They are
Yeah.
looking at the label they like, the one they know, the one they're familiar with, and that's what they buy.
Yeah. But that's the truth. That's and even people recommend the ones in the most of the bottle shops because they don't have the knowledge. They usually go in the same way. That's
Yeah,
what most people buy. That's what
yeah.
I know about. And that's what we recommend you to buy. So, and it just became like, and that's why marketing for me is such a big thing in the wine industry. The wine industry don't think they need marketing, but the more people recommend it, what people see or know about in the specific product, that's what they want to buy. When I work in the retailers, and I see like many of these guys come to the store all the time with the wines and they make my stuff to buy. That's what they recommend at the end of the day, because that's
Yeah,
my stuff we see that produce them most of the time. They taste it they all the time in the store. That's what they're familiar with, and that's what they
yeah.
haven't had. And then that's and I think people say, oh, I don't need marketing, I don't need anything. Buy brands, That's if you people don't remember you, it's not gonna do much. But yeah, so I think that's why it's another thing as well. We need to get better in the wine industry and the marketing because I think most of people think marketing is just put a picture on Instagram and that's it. The job is done, and then it's much more than that. So
But I'm
it's a
going to
lot.
pick up on two things. One is because the biggest problem that we don't talk about is margins. This is an industry where, compared to spirits, compared to beer, we don't make much money.
No,
And we don't make much money because it's self-imposed, and it starts in Europe where people buy wine by the region. We buy Rioja or Chianti or Bordeaux or whatever, and essentially you are brought down by the lowest, cheapest example of the wine from that region. And we have huge numbers of private labels. You in Australia, where you are now, you've got your Coles and Woolworths have their own private labels, and essentially there is a going price for a Barossa red. There's a going price for a Pinot Noir from wherever, and so on. And you're always competing with that lowest price. And if we go to the way wine is sold in supermarkets, or we go to the way wine is sold in monopoly stores in Scandinavia, for example, you have a tender, and you have to supply a wine that fits a particular category, and you say, right, send in your, in my case, your French or Cabernet Sauvignon from southern France, made from these grapes, and you're competing with all the others, and they will buy the one that tastes best at the lowest price. There is no margin, and if you have a margin, what will happen is the supermarket or the retailer will say, yes, I want some of that margin so we can discount your product. So your product is a $30 product, but we want to sell your product as a $20 product. Now, all that's happened here is that I've got even less margin than I had, but you've also brought the perceived value of my product down to $20. They don't do this to spirits to nearly the same extent. And even then, the spirits, I've already got a 20-25% margin to spend on marketing and promotion. So we start from there. The second thing is that because we don't have the money to do proper marketing as we would with other products, we rely on other tools. So we used to rely on critics. And we say, right, so we're going to take this guy out for lunch, or we're going to send him some bottles or her some bottles or whatever, and we're going to rely on them writing something in a magazine or a newspaper, and then it's all going to happen. Or we're going to send our wine to a few competitions, and we're going to get a gold medal or a 97 points or whatever. That's going to do all the work. And now, and those aren't working quite as well as they did. So now the new thing is wine tourism. That's going to solve everything. Now, you look there to, and the weird thing is that California's had wine tourism for longer than most. Australia's was early on, and Europe has only just discovered wine tourism. But the big problem, if you go to Napa now, there's too much wine tourism, there's too much offer. And we're finding that actually the tasting rooms haven't all filled up since COVID again. And they're all saying, hey, what do we do now? Because it's not working. And even when you do the numbers, if you're a sizable winery, wine tourism isn't going to be the answer. It will be an answer. It will help in terms of direct selling, but you will end up, if you're making 10, 20,000 cases of wine, you are going to need to sell in other ways. So then the next thing we've got is storytelling. We're actually going to solve everything by telling people the story. Now, the first question is when and how, what is the story? The first part is that most wines don't have a story.
No.
And the story they have
about the decades, my grandma, my grandfather.
So I've got kids. My kids are 19 and 17. So that it's recent enough that I remember reading them stories. But the wine industry story, there's only two stories. The story number one, my grandfather made wine, my father made wine, I've taken over making wine, and I make lovely wine, and I've got some medals, and I've just bought a new vineyard. Story number two, I used to be a gynecologist or a lawyer or something else, and one day I woke up and fell in love with wine, and I bought a vineyard, and I make lovely wine, and I just bought a new vineyard. End of story. These are not stories in the way that anybody understands a story. There is no jeopardy. There are no risks. There's no up and down or anything else. You don't ever hear about the fact that the first, right? We planted the vineyard in the wrong place. Never hear about that. You never hear about the neighbors tried to shut us down. You never hear about all the bad things that happened. You never hear about, we were trying to sell wine in China or whatever. So storytelling. But apart from anything else, and what I say to people is, please write down a list of the top brands that you know, from Nike through to BMW, through to whatever. And I just want to know, what is the story of Dell computers? What is the story of Nike? What is the story? Most people don't know any stories. They're drinking Illy or Lavazza coffee. Tell me about the background to Illy or Lavazza. Oh, I don't know. It's good coffee. So we're obsessed with the fact that if we told people that Emilio Lavazza was it would change anything. Lavazza has not relied on stories, on storytelling, to get people to drink Lavazza. What it's relied on is making coffee people like, giving them packaging that they can recommend, and using communications, advertising, whatever, that makes Lavazza look like something that I want to have in my life, more than Illy or more than whatever else is on the show.
So I do believe in storytelling because I pretty much a storytelling talk. But you're telling me like wineries don't need to they don't need to do storytelling.
No, Priscilla. What I'm saying is, it is storytelling, wine tourism, label design, all of these things. They're all tools, and you have a box
You
of
need to be
tools.
like together.
Yeah. So basically, if the only tool I have is a hammer, or the only tool I have is a screwdriver, I'm not going to be able to do very much. And so my point about it is that people are treating storytelling or tourism or whatever as if it is the one thing. And the one thing used to be the critic, the journalist, the whatever, and then we've moved on from that. And we're just going to have to learn that we need a toolbox. That, because I do consultancy, you do consultancy, and it's actually saying the toolbox I need for my Georgian wine, the tools I need for my Georgian wine are not the same tools. So if I'm selling 3.8 million bottles of my French wine, I honestly do not believe I'm going to get the story through to buyers of 3.8 million bottles of that wine in 65 countries. My Georgian wine, I'm doing 25,000 bottles of red, 25,000 bottles of white. Yes, I do need the story. And the only way I'll sell that wine is through the story. But my point is, it is horses for courses.
Yes, of course. If you're doing like a 19 crimes, for example, selling 5 million, I think it's 5 million bottles like a year, 5 million bottles a year. I guess you don't really need to, you need someone like someone famous, like what they do it, like a visual, and then they wanted to market in US. They wanted the younger men in US to drink it. So I guess it's how you target your market, who your market.
So 19 crimes, I have to say, is the and if you're ever coming up with a theory, you need to look at the exception to the rule. 19 crimes is the absolute exception to my rule, because it does have a story. It's got the criminals on the label, and then later on it's got Snoop. So yes, it's got a story and it's huge in value. But you cannot, and Kylie, a wine with any kind of celebrity on it, that is a story. But we can't all have a celebrity. We can't all create labels with criminals that move or whatever. Once somebody's taken that, you're going to have to do something else. And there's I've just come from Italy. You've got, I don't know how many halls there are, 14 halls full of thousands of bottles of wine. You haven't got thousands and thousands of stories.
No. And then I think other thing as well, I think you're pretty right when you said, when you talk about story, people really think this storytelling, it's a very basic one. They don't put emotional things in the storytelling. So I had like a conversation with a psychologist just in the other podcast. And then she was telling like what people missing is the connection. People doesn't make a storytelling to connect it. The people doing storytelling without any emotion, any connection. It's just like a very simple, like that's my, like exactly what you said. It's like I have another. I was in the lawyer doing whatever else, and then just getting loving for wine and just make wines, or have a family which make wines and start to make wines. It's the same. It's all the same. It doesn't change. It's just recorded things. You just press play in different areas and different people. And I guess that doesn't make it remarkable, because if you're hearing the same story many times, it's just becoming repetitive and doesn't make you stand out from the crowd. And then I think that is the things is actually people don't know. And then the same when you talk about facts, because when you talk about, when I did a post about storytelling, I have a guy and I said like all these facts is making the story of the wine. And yes, you could add it there, but I don't think just put it like a 12 months in oak, it's gonna make a huge difference of the another millions of wines is spending 12 months in oak as well. So it's you're not really the different, you're not a different and unique point of sales if you're doing 12 months in oak, because many people doing the same. And then, to be honest, the consumer doesn't even know what's the difference if you spend 6 months, 8 months, or 12 months.
So
What's
for my
going to be the difference between the tastes and these facts? Because I don't think that many people has that knowledge. Or even as one professional, do you really notice in the palate if you spend 6 months, 8 months, 12 months?
So
Do you
well,
know?
I'm in Georgia. We're doing something genuinely different because for the red wine is made from 9 different grapes, of which 2 are white. So we're co-fermenting the Saperavi juiced red grape. So it's already a grape that most people will never have come across. In fact, you squeeze it and red juice comes out, and we're fermenting that with white grapes. Now, actually, most people don't even notice that black grapes don't have black
Really?
juice. They, it's juice. They don't think about it. If you say, not to
Yeah.
think about it, but otherwise, yeah, it's grapes. And they don't necessarily know how wine is made, and they don't know that you don't put white grapes with red grapes when you're actually fermenting them, or it's not part of what they need to know about any more than they need to know how their bread is made or how anything else is made. It's just when you start to say, all of our neighbors, when nobody's done this, why are you doing this? And the fact that we experimented over a long time trying it and people laughing at us, that brings in a human element to the story, because most of us have tried things that people have laughed at. Most of us have got things wrong, or we've got them right, or whatever. So I think that the element of your purpose is the other, by the way, the other thing that we keep hearing about. Tell people you're going to sell your product because of purpose. Well,
Yeah.
my purpose is to rescue this obscure grape or this wonderful old vineyard or whatever. Yeah, that's great. Unfortunately, most people's purpose of making wine is actually not that different to most people's purposes of being a plumber or being a butcher or anything else. It's what you do for a living. It's
Yeah.
actually how you pay the bills at the end of the week. And the plumber would rather be a plumber than being a bricklayer. And the winemaker would rather be a winemaker than being a baker, for example. But this idea of the purpose, if we're not careful, again, it becomes a crutch that we're going to suddenly, everyone is going to buy my wine, my Georgian wine, for example, because I want to express the character of these Georgian grape varieties. How many people really are interested in knowing the character of these Georgian grape varieties? They want to drink. Once they've actually enjoyed, hopefully, once they've enjoyed the drink, then they may end up saying, now, why does it taste the way it does? And I'm going to come back to that in the way we do movies or music. What happens is I discover, I go and see a movie, I like the actor, I see another movie, I see that actor again, I think, hey, this is interesting. And then I go and read up about that actor. Or singer or whatever. It doesn't work the other way around. I don't sit around reading about lots of actors and then thinking, oh, I want to see this movie with that actor in it. Or
Yeah,
buy
exactly.
some music with that singer. Yeah, it'll happen occasionally. Of course it will. You'll read something in a magazine about a singer and you go, oh, she sounds interesting. I'll buy that. Most of the time, we hear the music, we see the movie first, and then we want to know more. And I think in wine, we need to look at it that way. So what does that mean? We need to do far more sampling. And that isn't wine tourism. Well, it includes wine tourism, but we've got to find other ways of doing wine sampling. And whether that involves selling wine in smaller quantities, because the risk, I mean, why, for God's sake, do we have to have the 75 cl bottle as the default? Now, I know that in Australia, you still have a lot of casks, but actually back in the day, casks used to be about 55, 56, nearly 60%, as they are in Sweden still. Today, casks are far smaller because everybody wants to see their wine as premium and being in a 75 cl bottle. But why? What is it about 75 centiliters that makes it the right size? It is the size, famously, of the glass bottle that people used to blow by hand. So here's my bottle. I'm blowing it by hand. In those days, the alcohol was probably 7 or 8 or 9%. and we've now got 14%. And when
Sometimes
they
more than that.
right, but when they were drinking that wine, and they were probably drinking quite a lot of it, it was food, it was calories. They were working physically. They didn't have much heat. They were burning it off. Now we're sitting in our warm houses drinking half a bottle of 14.5 or whatever percent. Why is that the right size? Why don't we
Yeah,
have more 50 cl? Why don't we do, we've just got to start thinking differently.
yeah,
And where I'm going to just say, throw the ball back at you, Priscilla, and at myself, we keep talking about how we should communicate about wine. We don't actually stop and think, what are we communicating about? Because what we as an industry are very, very good at doing, and I'm really going to say this very strongly now, if you
yeah.
sit 10 wine professionals down together, within 5 minutes, they will be criticizing some kind of part of the wine business they don't like. So we hated the Robert Parker wines.
Yeah.
We hate those sweet wines. We hate Sauvignon Blanc. What is it? What's the
Yeah.
Australian? Bitch
Yeah.
diesel. Bitch
Yeah.
diesel. Right? We hate.
Exactly.
We
That's
hate.
what's happened.
We hate Pinot Grigio because that, whatever that is. And then, oh my God, in America, they're putting red wine in bourbon barrels. How disgusting that is. And oh my God, in America, there's a company that are putting
We are humans. We like
fruit.
it. We like
For,
it. We
yeah,
love it to
for good.
judge.
But the wine industry, and then we also, as an industry, it gets even better because when we're not criticizing each other for the styles of wine that we don't think they should exist, we then also don't like other people's pricing. So we're really good at saying, oh my God, how can they ask that much money for a bottle of wine? And you go, hold on, it's in the fashion industry. Are they all standing around saying, oh my God, have you seen how much Versace is charging for a dress? They don't. They're
No,
saying,
no.
hey, that's great. Versace's getting $2,000 for a dress. How can I get 1,000, 1,500, or 500 or whatever? So where I am in the Languedoc, I do a really delicious rosé, which you buy in the States for $12. In Australia, it's probably like 25 or whatever. I don't know. But all I can tell you is it's delicious. It's not great, but it's a delicious rosé for that sort of price level. I'd like to make a more ambitious one. My neighbor, Gerard Bertrand, ex-former rugby player and very big, very successful producer in the region. I know him pretty well. He is the first. He's now selling the most expensive rosé in the world. It's $120, $130 a bottle, and it's from a vineyard down the road from where we are. And I know very. How can he charge that much? I think, thank you, Gerard. Please go on doing it. We need more people charging more money. We need more Dom Perignons. We need more Granges and Hills of Graces and so on at the top, so we can pull everybody up. Because I go to the bulk wine fair in Amsterdam every November, and I see and taste all of this perfectly drinkable wine that you can buy for 30, 40, 50, 60 US cents a liter.
Really? That's so
Yeah.
cheap.
So it's so cheap. In France at the moment, recently there's a bit of a discussion about it. The Carrefour supermarket was selling Bordeaux for €1.66
I read that article.
a bottle. That is basically about the same price as Red Bull, and it's heading for the same prices. It's more expensive than Coca-Cola vanilla, but we're growing grapes. We're working all year, even if we're doing it by machine. There's a certain amount of work and effort that goes into making wine. Too much wine is too cheap, and too many people are saying that too much wine is too expensive.
I don't think like it to put it the wine is down and don't have a profit. It's gonna make the business better, because if you don't have your money, if you don't make your money making wines, you're not going to keep in doing that for long. Your kids don't want to keep doing that for long because they can see you struggling, and the industry is not going to survive for long. I don't really like it that gaming to put in the prices down and even down and try to put in like because it's not sustainable. It's not gonna take us to anywhere. It's like and then to be honest, I think the industry is so at the moment they are so we not selling wines and they have a big problem. And unfortunately, going to see lots of people closing their wineries. Like small and medium wineries, they won't be, not going to do much because it's no point. We have too many bottles of wines available, and not so many people drink it. We do have a big problem in supply chain. We all know that is globally, it's happening everywhere. And in my opinion, it started to complain about this crisis. It started to be focused on that numbers. I think we just need to create opportunities because, for example, I'm originally from Brazil. And then in Brazil, for example, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I left to Brazil, we didn't even have, like in my city, we didn't even have wine. So in my city, when you ask for wine, they come like in a little jar, like a juice
Yeah,
jar, and they put the wine there on the table. And then going back to my city, 12 years after, we have these amazing restaurants with like wine tasting. People drink wines, and we, since 2007 to like COVID, we actually double the consumption per person, and then per capita, sorry. And then even like since 2017, Brazil is one of the countries is not actually declining, we're actually increasing because these old
yeah,
people is actually learning or drinking wine now. Like my mom and dad doesn't drink wine, but people of my age, it's the people actually drinking wines in Brazil at the moment. So, and that is what I see. Lots of different things and opportunities in the wine industry.
sure.
When you talk about the supply chain and about these things as well, I think we sometimes we try to do the same thing we have done for the last 50, 60, 100 years, and then we don't really see other places, or we don't really see other opportunities, or we keeping just, it's like you drive a car. You drive a car and it's there automatically, you do it every day. So, and you don't really see anything else around you. You don't even see if there is a car, red car or blue car, whatever
Sure.
else coming along you, because you just automatically do that every day. And I think that's pretty much what I see in the wine industry at the moment with everything else that's happened around us. It's like, I think we just see, so talking about the crisis, but we don't talk about the opportunity that every single crisis actually brings to any.
Look, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's two things though, which ultimately Adam Smith and Darwin, basically Darwin talking about evolution, industries evolve. And what happens is, and it isn't the strongest that survive, it's the most adaptable that survive. And essentially, most of the industry is not adapting very well. We are going to lose a large number of producers, and we're going to lose a large area of vineyards. And that is, it's like losing species of flower or animal or whatever. It's sad. It's tragic on a human level, but it's inevitable. It's the way it's going to happen, and it's the way that evolution has always happened. It's just going to happen faster. So the only
Mm.
way to avoid that happening is through adaptability, and actually realizing that doing, as you just said, doing what your father did, or even what you did 5 or 10 or 20 years ago is no longer going to matter, and not going to work. But the other thing is Adam Smith. Basically, there's a supply and demand equation. If we're making too much wine and we haven't created a demand for our particular wine, we are not going to make any money. And if we don't make any money, we are going to go become extinct. So it's putting those two things together. It's one is adapting to the market and adapting to conditions, and two, building into that adaptability sufficient understanding that you need to be desirable. There needs to be a demand for your product. And the moment that you are just another example of Australian Syrah or Australian or French Chardonnay or whatever, you are going to be pushed down and down. And eventually you're not, as you use the word sustainable as an industry, it'd be very interesting to use an AI tool to analyze the use of the word sustainable by the wine industry. And I will lay money that 90 whatever percent is going to be to do with sustainability in terms of pesticides and herbicides and all those sort of things. The number of times people talk about financial, economic sustainability is far, far too rare. And we need to get both right. We absolutely need to do environmental sustainability. Of course we do. That almost goes without saying. But we can, if we're not economically sustainable, we're not going to be saying, do I use the chemical pesticide, or do I do it organically or biodynamic, whatever, because we're just not going to be there.
Yeah. I guess it's lots of rethinking in the wine industry these days. I think we have so many, like how we make wines, how we're marketing wines, how we communicate it, how we actually sell, how, I think it is all these things we need to readapt it. It's like how we actually make people interested more about wine, how we're not boring people when you talk about wine. I think that's all the wine education doesn't like wine professional. We just, that's what I thought for me. I took like my example. I felt like more I did more wine studies, more I get more all these studies. I know more about the soil clones more than anyone else. I'm gonna get like the best job. Till I realized that the best job never gonna come just by I know how many the types of soils or the clones or how many varieties or all the appellation, memorized all the appellation they are in the world. And I just realized that this business is much more than that. The business is about, networking, like what we actually do to different, how we can actually bring innovation, how we can make things be better than was before. And then that is about the things we needed to think when you talk about business. And then for me, you are one of the best consultants in the business, the strategies, in the wine industry. And I would like to ask you 3 advices for people watching us. You're gonna give it for them who is in the wine business, who is struggling at the moment, what they can do different today to help them to keep in business.
Okay, so I think every Christmas we do, like a lot of people, we do the jigsaw puzzle, and you spend time just trying to find where to put this. It's either there's a hole, what can I put in that hole, or I've got this piece, where do I put this piece? To me, whatever the product you are making or selling, it is a jigsaw piece. It has to find a hole on the board. And if there isn't a space in your jigsaw puzzle, then there's a problem. Maybe you need to find a different puzzle or a different piece. So the first thing I'm going to say is actually work out what have you got, what is your product, how does it fit into the market? And for 5 minutes, or maybe longer than 5 minutes, stop thinking about it as wine. Imagine that your product was something else. Imagine that you were selling a book. Imagine you were selling an item of clothing or olive oil or whatever. We get so bogged down with wine and we say, well, wine is different. People treat wine differently, whatever. No, ultimately, a bottle of wine that costs $20, $30, whatever the price is coming out of somebody's wallet that has $100 or $1,000. If they don't spend the $30 on your bottle of wine, they'll spend $30 on something else. So why is your bottle of wine worth $30 of their hard-earned money? Number one. Secondly, who is that person? Not, basically, as I said earlier, different people buy my different wines. Who is the person who's going to buy each of your wines? Once you've understood who that person is, it's going to be a lot easier to understand how to talk to them, where to talk to them. Because, if I'm going to try and sell Cru Classé Bordeaux, TikTok may not be the best method. On the other hand, funnily enough, I did some consultancy for a Bordeaux Chateau making delicious white Pessac Léognan. A stylish women's magazine might well be a very good place for that product, because there are a lot of women who can afford to buy very good clothes, who actually do buy high quality white wine, not just white wine, but for example. And when we did the research into that particular wine, we found that a disproportionate number of buyers were women in their 40s in New York and in London who earned good salaries. They would buy that wine. So how do we talk to them? They're not necessarily buying a wine magazine. I guarantee you they're not buying a wine magazine, but they might well be buying other lifestyle companies. So to think about where you're going to talk to the key person and what is the message that is going to have some resonance for them. And lastly, I think, is to actually understand that each of us as a human being, we're multifaceted. You know, basically, the worst thing we do, it's like bad speed dating, the way we do most of our communication. We go up to somebody and we say, "Hello, I'm Robert Joseph. Da 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 da. I've told you everything about me." You asked me to do that at the beginning of this interview, but you're going up to a stranger and doing that, and then you say, "Right, now, do you want to go out with me?" The speed dating, and I've not done it, but my understanding of speed dating is you sit down and say, "Hi, I'm Robert. So, Priscilla, what do you like doing?" So when you've told me that you're a vegetarian who hates skiing, I'm probably not going to say, "Hey, let's go off to a steak restaurant and fly off to Chamonix." Listen to the customer and use if you've got a tasting room, and you should have a tasting room, don't just use your tasting room as a way to sell your wine directly. Use your tasting room as a way to listen to the customers who are there, and see whether try a red label versus the blue label. Try showing them the wine with a little bit more oak or less oak or whatever, and listen to them rather than the critics, or as well as the critics and everyone else. We just got to start looking at wine in a very, very different way. And that is going to include the styles of wine, it's going to include the packaging, it's going to include the pricing, it's going to include where and how we sell it. But all I know is that the current model is not sustainable. And I'm really happy it's not working. And they always say, if you go on doing what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. Well, that's not true. Actually, if you go on doing what you've always done, you're going to get less and less of what you've always got. So Priscilla, you were very nice about me. I am so happy to know you and to know what you're doing. I am a few years older than you, and we need more young people like you. I'm sounding old when I say this, but you know, I have no problem saying that. We need new generations coming through who are going to enthuse new generations of wine drinkers. And you know, we also need to keep the boomers on board. So it's how do we do the whole thing?
Yeah, and I like your approach when you said it's not about this generation, and it's about like the whole thing, because at the end of the day, all the social media, all the technology, and influence the whole society. And to be honest, all behaviors has been changing since 5 years ago, even 2 years ago. Like everything's changing so much every day. And then we just need to adapt it quicker. And then we need to, and the wine industry, unfortunately, they tended not to adapt it. And I think that's a very strong and powerful message for me. And in this podcast,
where the consumers choose. I hear people saying, wine people, the States, so cannabis is now legal in just about everywhere. Very few of my wine friends can imagine people actually using cannabis, which may now be drunk or eaten rather than smoked, or sort of smoked, rather than drinking a glass of wine, because they can't imagine doing it themselves. But actually say, well, you know, what if? What do we like about wine? It relaxes you. What does weed do? It relaxes you. Wine is social. Weed is potentially social. And I'm not here promoting weed at all. All I'm just saying is just put your feet into their shoes. And when they're buying bourbon barrel aged wine, instead of saying, "God, you are disgusting, tasteless savages," hey, you like drinking bourbon. So yeah, I get it. You like drinking wine that tastes of bourbon. I get it. And I'm not going to demonize you. I don't have to make bourbon flavored wine. I might do, I might not. But I'm not going to demonize you for liking something different to what I like. I need just to understand where you're coming from. Because the moment I understand the fact that you like barrel wine and you like weed or you like fruit flavored wine, it makes it a lot easier for me to say this is where the wine I'm making fits into this world. Maybe it doesn't fit for any of those people, but I need to find out who it does fit for.
Yeah, and I agree. I think when you became wine professionals, and we tended to drink your wines with complexity and these flavors because it looks like better quality. And then when you talk about quality, I always talking about quality for who you talk about quality, because I think quality for each market, quality for each person, for each target market. Because like I put it like for someone from my family, I put it like $10 a bottle, and I put $100 a bottle, and they really like the $10. It's like
Yeah,
that tastes amazing. I don't like it how the taste is wine, and I don't care about the price. So
sure.
I don't think this is necessary, or price or quality or whatever. I think it depends like what your market is, how you target the people you wanted to actually
Precisely.
communicate it. And if you communicate for these people, that's everything is going to be much easier as well. But I think something that we do a little bit outside, you just wanted to market to everyone. Everyone is going to be your market. You don't try to be niche. We try to talk with everyone all the time. But thank you so much, Robert. I think
Thank you,
it's a
Priscilla.
very powerful message. I really like the three devices. So looking for your target market, looking for what you're talking about, and don't think it only putting magazines will be the only thing is only a tool. So have a look in other way to market for the people actually you target, if they like other types of magazines or other events or anything, so you can be there so they can actually see you. I like the way you say like you find the actually hole for your product, like every single thing has have a place to go. And I think that is a very powerful message, and we needed to be bring it to the wine industry. And then I actually say, if you don't doing things different, you're gonna get the same results. And I notice I'm wrong with that after this talk with you, because yes, if I keep eating chips every day, when I'm getting older, I can get a fat and fat and fat. So yes, you're getting less and less and less and less and less. I agree with you about that, because your body changes, your metabolism changes, and then you're not gonna be skinny was when it's 20, when it became 40 or 50 by eating the same thing. And I think that's exactly what your analogy, and then that's something I actually going to change when I'm talking about it. We not get the same results, we actually get it worse to do so. Thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time.
Priscilla. It's been a
It was
pleasure.
very
Thank
lovely to
you.
talk to you, and then I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Obrigado.